Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to this final bit of coverage coming to you live from the Lonestar Paracon right here in Schertz, Texas. We have the incredible joy of being joined by our very, very good friend, Ken Gerhard. Welcome back to the show, man. It's always great seeing you at these. You were here speaking today. Your presentation was about 14 cryptids of Texas. I don't think people really grasp the panoply of cryptozoology that we have here in the Lone Star State. I mean, of course, jackalope, things like that. Most people are familiar with that. But we really do have a large swath of critters that run around the state that are unknown, that have an amazing legendary history. So let's get into a few of those. What were some of the key ones that you brought up that people may not have heard of?
Well, let's see. Obviously, I started with the rock star, as I call him, Bigfoot. But, you know, there's some interesting twists on Bigfoot in Texas. The most famous is probably the Lake Worth Monster, also known as the Goat Man. And I guess that's a little confusing to people, but the original eyewitnesses, John Reichert and some of the other people that first encountered it, described it as a scaly goat man, whatever that means. But subsequent witnesses described it as basically an upright ape-like creature, but with a white color or pelage, which is kind of unusual. Only a very small percentage of eyewitnesses ever describe a Bigfoot that's other than black, brown, or, you know, traditional dark colors. So, you know, scientifically you could talk about, you know, albino or leucistic or, you know, different genetic things, or maybe it's just age. Maybe they get
much like a silverback gorilla, things like that. As they age, that's how their coat grows.
As they age, But, you know, that's interesting that the Lake Worth Monster was basically portrayed as a white-colored Bigfoot, which is very unusual. And I'm familiar with a few other Bigfoot reports from that time period in the 70s that were kind of white-colored. In East Texas, Corsicana, and other places. And then also the Horizon City Monster is a Bigfoot-type creature that's been reported just outside of El Paso, out in the desert, which is, again, very strange, unusual. You don't associate Bigfoot typically with flat desert areas. So.
And, you know, it is fascinating because when you get out that way, you know, you do start running across some bear population, things like that, you know, out there in the far West Texas area, things like that.
Exotic things that have escaped off ranches and stuff. Who knows?
Well, and that's one that I think that a lot of people discount, Ken. Especially, I grew up in the area of, you know, Left Turn Clyde, things like that, where the world of primate and people's homes had kind of crossed in the mid to late 70s. It became kind of in vogue to have like a pet monkey. You know, you saw Michael Jackson even come with Bubbles to the to the music awards, things like that. So there was a spate for a little while of people having like pet orangutans, stuff like that did occur, and especially here in Texas, because we have a huge population of people here with exotic animals, exotic breed pets, things like that.
Yeah. Well, at one time there were hundreds of feral monkeys in South Texas down near Dilley, Japanese snow macaques that had been imported and escaped from a... and I'm familiar with a monkey that was shot up near Coleman, Texas, in West Texas years ago, and that created kind of... So, yeah, you're right. That kind of gets mixed in. Another thing about the Horizon City Monster is that eyewitnesses from the 70s as well as eyewitnesses from the early 2000s all described it as having, you know, looking like a traditional Sasquatch in terms of big, hairy, man-like, upright. But all of the eyewitnesses depicted its ears as being very pointy and prominent, which you almost never hear about Bigfoot's ears, right? They're covered with fur. And also that it displayed a level of prognathism where the lower jaw was like really sticking out like a bulldog or something.
Okay.
So almost shades of a dogman type creature, if people are familiar with that cryptid. I'm sure they are if you listen to your show.
Absolutely.
So covered a little bit of Bigfoot, and then, of course, the other big Texas cryptids are the Texas version of the chupacabra, which most people are familiar with are kind of weird, grotesque dog-like animals that are really not true cryptids anymore because we've got their remains, and bones and DNA and stuff. Big Bird, I mentioned, which of course is kind of how I started my research here in Texas, down in the Rio Grande Valley, looking into these giant winged creatures, different descriptions. Some people say it looked bat-like or prehistoric or like just a big, ugly black bird.
Yeah. As
far as lesser-known cryptids, some of the fun ones I've investigated in the state include like the so-called mountain boomers, or some people call them river dinos, which have been described as basically small 5-foot-tall upright lizards. Very similar to like certain small dinosaurs, ornithopod dinosaurs that were around, velociraptors.
I was just about to say, when you say upright lizard, you mean a bipedal lizard, something along the lines of a T-Rex or...
Yeah, in fact,
velociraptor.
Texas T-Rex is kind of a name that I coined, even though the size is not...
It's vastly different.
Yeah, but, those have been documented and reported. Sightings of those have been documented and reported in southern Colorado and northern New Mexico for years. And then in Texas, we kind of got our own version. But I did interview a woman named Michelle Rains from Hebronville, which is about 2 hours south of San Antonio. And she claimed she saw one of these things probably in the early 2000s, that it was described as like a small snake-like head with a long neck, but attached to a body and a long tail. And this thing was definitely upright the whole time she saw it moving on its hind legs. So we do have some large lizards here in Texas, of course.
We do.
But nothing that's bipedal, although it's interesting, there's a tie-in between the name mountain boomer, which is used in Texas and Oklahoma for these creatures, and an actual native lizard known as the eastern collared lizard, and sometimes referred to as a mountain boomer in kind of slang terms. They do run upright.
They do.
When they're scared and they're moving very fast, but they're only about 14 inches tall, which is a big difference from 5 feet. I doubt that any eyewitness, even under duress, would confuse 14 inches with 5 feet.
Yeah, you'd be looking more the size of your standard backyard home chicken or even a Texas Roadrunner at that point, at full size, you know. And that's a strange one. I was going to say, like, I know like the 6-line lizard is prone to run on its hind legs whenever highly excited. I guess. But that's even one that, like, you're talking maybe 10 to 12 inches, tail included. You know, like the thickness of my thumb. Not a large dog-sized critter running around or larger.
No.
You know.
No.
So.
I mean, now, the only other thing, now that you mentioned it, and you're bringing up some good points, I believe some varanids or, monitor lizards, and they get pretty big. We know the Komodo dragon is the top of the line there at 10 feet, but some of those might be able to move on their hind legs for a very short period of time.
In bursts.
Yeah, and those, going back to your point earlier, lots of people collect large monitor lizards.
Absolutely.
They're very popular in the pet trade. So so that's a cool cryptid. There are not a lot of aquatic cryptids that have been reported in Texas. We don't have an actual Nessie per se, or a Champ or Ogopogo.
Yeah.
There are rumors of a lake monster in Lake Granbury known as One Eye, and that it's kind of old, vague stories, and also reports of something in the Brazos River years ago. But most of the aquatic cryptids around Texas include reports of the classic traditional sea serpents off the coast of Galveston.
Really?
Very old stories from the 1800s of ship's captains. I think there was a craft called the St. Olaf in the late 1800s that claimed that they saw this 100-foot-long snake-like animal out in the Gulf of Mexico, off the coast of Galveston.
Yeah.
2 or 3 of those stories, but they're very old. But most of the aquatic cryptids in Texas, and the ones that I've investigated, include accounts of monstrous catfish.
Yeah.
As big as a Volkswagen is the common description. So.
And, I will definitely say I used to do a bit of trot lining at a time, and I have definitely sat atop of catfish for a picture, Ken. You could fit a 30-gallon trash bag in this animal's mouth.
Yeah,
they're big, like the size of this 6-foot table. They're big, And even whenever you look at here in the last year, there have been 3 record-setting gar caught in Texas that are upward of 300 pounds, 8, 9, 10 feet long. You're talking about a mouth the size of this table almost. It's an alligator gar. It's called such because it looks like an alligator mouth like that. A small one will frighten a good fisherman, much less one 7, 8, 9 feet long. Like that is literally a living dinosaur roaming the bayous of Texas.
They're weird-looking fish, too.
Yeah.
You see them roll on the surface, and they have that prehistoric, like you said.
Yeah. You got scales,
bumpy, scaly.
Scales the size of your thumbnail. A
mouth just lined with razor-sharp, tiny little teeth.
And when you see them, especially in the shallows, things like that, they can be freaky looking, and you can definitely see 2 or 3 points of water moving at the same time.
Yeah. But in terms of catfish, you're right. There are 2 native species here in Texas that get quite large: the channel cats and blue catfish, Ictalurus furcatus. And the state record on those, I actually got to see the state record back in 2005. It was named Splash. It was caught in Lake Texoma. It was 121 pounds.
Wow.
And they kept it alive at the Fisheries Museum in Athens, Texas for a couple years. It sadly passed away, but I got to go see that. But we're talking about something even much larger than that. Now, around the world, of course, there are much larger species. The Wells catfish in Europe, the Mekong catfish in Asia, and in the Goliath catfish in South America all get much bigger than anything here in North America, allegedly. So you have the potential for catfish to grow to these monstrous sizes. But the most famous one in Texas is in Lake of the Pines, which is up near Jefferson, one of our haunts.
Yep.
And there's a legend of a giant catfish named Oscar. And the story, if you talk to the locals, the story goes that Oscar swam into a sunken Cadillac. I guess the window was cracked or something when it was very small, and somehow got trapped in that underwater Cadillac and got bigger and bigger, and just kind of ate everything that swam in the window until it got monstrous, and then it finally broke out of this Cadillac, and it's allegedly eaten dogs that have been walking on the shoreline. And so, I didn't see Oscar, but I went out there couple times and just kind of poked around.
I can definitely say, just as a fisherman, there's some truth to that. Like I have seen people use ducklings for bass bait.
Oh, okay.
Because a fish is literally a predatory thing. It does not care. Like, it could be a baby bass swimming in front of it. If it fits in its mouth, it's dinner. That's how a fish thinks. It's not like, oh, look, one of my fellow bass. Like, that's not how it works. If it's smaller and it swims in front, you're gone. That's just how that works. And to see bass that get that big, and once again, even to see catfish that can fit halfway across a john boat.
It's a shock to see anything
big fish.
In fresh water. You don't expect, if you're out in the ocean, that's a whole nother story. Yeah. But if you're in a river, a lake, or whatever, and you see something as big as your table, that's a problem.
And now, one of my favorite things about you, Ken, is that you, for years, have worked here at the San Antonio Zoo. You live in the world of zoology on a daily, almost. Not just cryptozoology, but actual, biology and working with zoologists, things like that, even to help bring about things like the reintroduction program of things like, horned toads, stuff like that.
Yeah, we've got a bunch of those that we bred at the zoo, and we've released them we have one ranch. It's an undisclosed location because we don't want anyone messing with
going out and harvesting baby horned toads.
And there hasn't been any reintroduction, but we have a conservation scientist at the zoo named Dante Fenolio, who's a pretty amazing guy. He grew up in the Amazon, and he's been all over the world searching for all kinds of endangered species, but he has discovered in parts of South Texas several species of blind cave salamanders and catfish and all kinds of. He's a caver, so he goes way down deep into these isolated cave systems where you have these species that have evolved isolated for such a long period of time that they're really unique, but sadly most of them are very endangered also. So we have been trying to figure out ways to breed those at the zoo, but there's so many unknowns with something that is an unknown species that's never been bred anywhere.
Yeah.
So they kind of have to figure that kind of stuff out.
Exactly, and that, one of the reasons I bring up those credos with you is the idea of invasive species. Even fishing in my backyard in Houston, Texas, right off of Highway 6 in Briar Forest, middle of the city, man, I have caught koi.
Wow.
No less than 2 feet.
Yeah.
Because people took very tiny little baby koi and used them as bait fish. Things like, because in murky water, look at this goldfish, bass. I used to use little feeder goldfish as crappie bait in the same exact pond.
Yeah.
And it would blow my mind because sometimes, I'd catch me a big old goldfish that just had a whole pond to grow in now because it got off a hook.
Those do turn up a lot, those invasive koi
I was
goldfish.
just about to say, what are the odds of something, especially like a Mekong catfish, something like that? Those are pretty popular in aquariums, that kind of stuff. Asian catfish, things like that.
Yeah.
What are the odds of something like that? Even a placostomus will get to the size of this table, given the space to grow. I've seen them in Buffalo Bayou, 3.5 feet long, sucking on a rock. What are the odds of something like that being in our water and that possibly being the source of these stories?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that happens where, look, we have to acknowledge that fishermen are, no offense, because I'm
That's okay.
here.
Hey.
I'm just speaking in general.
That's right.
Fishermen tend to tell what we refer to as
Fish.
big fish stories. The one that got away.
We do.
So, some of these stories are, they are based on bona fide. Like you said, I've gotten accounts like that too of exotic. People have caught in, Lake Conroe years ago. Someone caught a pacu. It looks like a piranha.
Yep.
But
a pacu,
But you know what? It became a piranha.
Yes.
Because it was cooler to say that. Oh, they caught a piranha in Lake Conroe, and that kind of spreads. So.
Even the story of Lake Houston, the consummate conservation cautionary tale of, so to get rid of all the chink foil in the water and everything else that was gumming up the works and messing up people's motors and stuff like that, tearing up props, we brought in some freshwater piranha.
Yeah.
And we let them go to, they're vegetarian piranha, so they aren't going to eat what's there. But now you got all these piranha that have just like destroyed things in a way that the natural fish would have never done.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
invasive species are a problem everywhere, in every niche.
It literally became the fact that, Texas Park and Wildlife, I believe, ended up putting a bounty out for them. Where it was like, if you catch them, let us know so we can keep track of how many have been caught.
That I did not know. Yeah.
So we know that we're closer to getting them out of the system. But that was a huge issue that happened about 10 years ago at Lake Houston that was really mind-blowing to me when it happened. It was like, whoa, what happened here? And that's something that we talk about pretty regularly, especially with Craig Woolheater and other people, is the idea of conservationism when it comes to cryptozoology. I think that this community especially has a unique perch to sit upon to be able to approach the world of conservationists and to really get that conservationist movement going amongst it. Because if you want to preserve Bigfoot, what you really need to preserve is his roaming ground.
Right, yeah.
Because if you want to talk about it being a problem, it's going to be a real problem. We encroach too far, and now Bigfoot's digging through the dumpster in the local Quickie Mart.
Yeah.
As a bear is prone to do when you get too close and you provide a whole bunch of food in a bucket.
Well, there have been accounts of them digging through dumpsters.
Absolutely.
So,
Because, much like any animal, especially one, as you've been on the show with me before, I hold the fact that it is likely, much like any good bear, it may hunt on occasion, may fish on occasion, probably ain't going to take any large game because that's just dangerous to it. But it'll gladly snatch a squirrel off a tree, maybe even eat a little bit of carrion if it's fresh. But aside from that, it's a really big roamer and grazer.
Right.
Yeah. And that's just it. Like, we have to protect that area of forage for them. Is it really the fact? Do we have enough, at least wildlife conservation-wise, do we have enough food for a ranging large hominid of that size?
Yeah, I would say, if they are generalist omnivores, I mean, there's plenty to eat in terms of, small game. I mean, shoot, we were, since we're talking about this theme of invasive species, I mean, let's acknowledge the issue with invasive pigs in Texas.
Yes.
There's millions and millions of them, and they just are out of control, right?
Yeah.
On every ranch and property.
To the point that there's almost no license.
Yeah.
Just if you see them, have fun.
Yeah. So theoretically, a Sasquatch could probably eat pork, for its entire life. I mean, there's enough pigs in Texas for something like that.
And that brings something up, because you do, on occasion in groups on social media, see images of a torn carcass of a pig, things like that. There was specifically one that made the circles a couple years ago. I believe it was out of Australia, saying a Yowie did this. I always found it odd because there was not a lot of blood on the scene. You think if you ripped a hog open, there'd be blood everywhere. I've gutted a hog. There tends to be a little bit of blood, even if you're doing it right. Much less if you rip one asunder. Do you think that is the kind of behavior that a large critter like that would exhibit on the norm?
Oh, gosh. Yeah, that's a good question as far as like the actual predation and how they would do it and stuff. I've had some interesting discussions with Bigfoot researchers around the country in terms of what they've observed in strange livestock killings, animal carcasses that they found and stuff. The weirdest thing that I saw was a guy in Pennsylvania had a photograph of a white-tailed deer that was stuck in the fork of a tree, low to the ground, and pulled in both directions so that it was basically pulled in half, or into two parts, and with all the guts and entrails kind of in between.
Okay.
So I've never heard of anything like that before, but I mean, we know that big cats will drag the deer up trees and things like that.
Absolutely.
But this was not up hanging out of range of other scavengers and things to get to. It was like, it was like something had used the fork in this tree as a tool to, basically position this thing and then kind of
separate it.
Yeah, so that's weird. Similarly, I heard an account from a guy in Minnesota a couple years ago that was up riding horseback in northern Minnesota, and he claimed that there was a coyote laying on the trail ahead of them that had its back broken, like it had been thrown there.
Oh, wow.
And it couldn't move. It was paralyzed. I mean, it was alive, and it was just kind of like, and they got off their horses and checked it out, and they're like, how did this coyote break its back? It's not, it didn't fall. There's no obvious way that it didn't end up like that. So there are some accounts like that. But I'm, as far as like the livestock killings or predations that I'm notified of, typically it's, more of the traditional weird surgical. No, look, we can explain the eyes and the tongue are always going to be eaten first by scavengers.
Right. That's right.
So whenever you hear about a weird livestock or animal killing and the eyes were missing and the tongue was missing, that's not that weird. Scavenging birds will go right for that stuff.
Feel free to visit any taco truck around San Antonio or Austin or Houston. You will find lingua on the menu.
Right.
Like, even we go after it. It's a sweetbread.
Me, not so much.
Yeah, but I'm just saying.
I get your point.
It's within the realm of cuisine.
Yeah.
Is what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, it's on the menu. And I like some exotic tacos here and there. Maybe not lingua so much. The BFRO has documented a lot of deer killings where supposedly the liver was the first and primarily targeted organ.
Okay.
And they find the deer carcasses, and the liver's always gone in these assumed Bigfoot predations. So yeah, there are like hints and rumors of like, could Bigfoots and Sasquatches hunt this way, or what exactly are they doing? I would think they're still prone to, much like bears or other animals that are capable of killing very large. But as you said, why do that?
Risky.
If there's a rabbit versus an elk, you're going to go for the rabbit, right?
Yeah.
The rabbits are very fast and hard to catch. So I've always thought that Bigfoots and Sasquatches are more of like, scavenging and foraging for things like mollusks and grubs and crustaceans and
even
things that...
Even fishing as a bear would.
Yeah. Or even, again, being lazy about it. There's I can't remember the name of the river, but it's up in Washington State, right there in the Olympic Peninsula. And for years there, the local tribe has talked about, they do these seasonal salmon runs where they put out these big nets because they know, they've been there for so long that they know when the salmon are coming. And that traditionally the Sasquatches figured this out, and they would come down and start, even when they were there, and just start stealing the nets and the salmon, right? So it's maybe a little bit easier for them to.
Yeah.
So I would say that, and again, it's all speculation.
Sure.
But Sasquatches probably, they have to eat a lot. They do eat a lot of vegetation. We know they're omnivores. That's been well documented. They eat rodents and small animals and things like that. I've seen evidence that they eat turtles, like you said, fish.
Okay.
Mollusks. Probably not so much, even though we were, it's fun to kind of envision them hunting large animals like big deer and pigs and things like that. Probably not as frequent, so.
Yeah.
But who knows? It's all fun to talk about.
Well, yeah, because once again, it is a hearsay and speculation, and all scientific speculation as well, though, which you have to kind of be able to do. And that's the plus side.
Yeah. Let's keep it scientific, folks. That's all I ask.
Well, that's just it. It's one of those. I think we have a fantastic opportunity. One of my favorite things to discuss. Is actually from our mutual friend Ryan Edwards, that gap of discovery, that idea of when did we scientifically get a zest for it, and when did we discover it and prove it, and even one of the things he talks about regularly in his presentations is that idea of the lowland gorilla. By the time the natives had told us about it, we'd heard about it. Oh, you're crazy. There's nothing up there. What are you talking about? We go up there. There's nothing there. It took 75 years for science to prove the existence of the lowland gorilla, when the natives there were like, no, we're telling you, it's there. Like, we've lived with it for generations. It's there. Trust us.
Sure.
And I regularly fodder you on Facebook with like, hey, did you see this resurrected species that nobody's seen for decades, and suddenly it's back again? It's pretty regular that
I love that stuff.
We miss that mark scientifically, or that we declare something gone, and lo and behold, even the ivory-billed woodpecker is back in America. Seen quite a few times over the last few years, so very well documented that it is back. It is not extinct. Hasn't been. Couldn't have ever really been extinct if it's here.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, Lazarus taxon. That does happen a lot. So.
Yeah. So. You're working on a new book right now. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, thanks for the plug, Christopher.
Absolutely.
It's the Essential Guide to Mothman and Other Flying Humanoids. It's actually a revised version of a book that I published 12 years ago called Encounters with Flying Humanoids, but I've added a lot of new material to this book. It obviously features Mothman as kind of the rock star of flying humanoid type creatures.
Sure.
I cover that case, and similar to my other essential guides, I provide the reader with the most accurate, fact-checked, objective information about that particular creature.
Yeah.
But I've also interviewed many people that claim they've encountered Mothman-type creatures in places like Mexico, here in Texas, other parts of the U.S., Canada, and then I also talk about, of course, in antiquity, we have in mythologies all over the world, these anthropomorphic creatures with humanoid features combined with those of a bat or a bird, winged.
Yeah.
You can go back to, ancient Sumeria and, the Apkallu, the Harpies in Greek mythology. In Europe, you have all types of, the Scree and...
Yeah.
So it's basically, it's Essential Guide to Flying Humanoids. And, I covered and added some new stuff like the Chicago Mothman case, of course, and some of the more of the more modern cases. So, it's due to be out hopefully in May. That's what I'm shooting for right now.
Let's definitely get you back on whenever it comes in and get you a little bump for the promotion of it.
I appreciate that.
Absolutely,
you,
always. But thank you so much for your time. It's always a pleasure talking with you.
Always, brother.
We're getting ready to close this thing down. Let everybody know where they can go to, because you have some amazing courses. I hold a certificate in your courses.
You do.
They're absolutely awesome. They are full
Thank
of
you.
tons of material.
Thank
tons.
Thank you.
Let everybody know where they can go to find your books, where they can go to find your courses, everything Ken Gerhard. Let them know.
Well, the obvious place is kengerhard.com, which you graciously helped me kind of
thank you.
Revise and update. So kengerhard.com, and there's a link at the top for if you want to check out my online courses. You can also find me on Patreon, Exploring Cryptozoology. And, of course, I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, and all those other good places. So.
Awesome. Thank you so much, bud. I appreciate it again.
Thanks, Christopher.
Absolutely,
good event.
and always.
Hopefully we all had a good time. I did.
I always have a good time.
Okay, good.
Ken, thanks again, bud. Always appreciated. While you are online checking out all of the amazing work of Ken Gerhard over at kengerhard.com, everybody, make sure to stop on by Curious Realm. CuriousRealm.com is where you can like, follow, subscribe. That's where you can catch all the episodes. That's where you can find also the books and classes and movies from our guests. You can also find your copy of the Field Observation and Encounter Log from Curious Research. If you are an investigator in the world of cryptozoology, paranormal, or UFO, UAP, this is your in-your-pocket field log to be able to put down all of the data that you gather while you are in the field, so it is ready in a scientific manner to shake hands with science come the day it needs to do so.
Good stuff.
Absolutely.
I have a copy myself.
Thank you.
Yep.
And thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for your open hearts, your open minds. That is what makes the conversation, and without the conversation, humanity does not move forward. That officially wraps it for our live coverage here on site of the Lonestar Paracon here in Schertz, Texas. Remember, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and stay curious. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of The Curious Realm. Stay tuned for more guests, forbidden topics, and hidden truths. Follow us on social media by searching Curious Realm. To download the official Curious Realm app and view the Knowledge Vault, or become a sponsor of Curious Realm, visit our website at curiousrealm.com. Curious Realm is available on your favorite podcast and video services, curiousrealm.com, as well as KGRA Radio, APRTV, and the official Curious Realm app for Roku devices. Curious Realm is a proud member of the Zero Media family of podcasts. For more shows and members-only content, visit groundzeroplus.com today. Thanks for listening. Stay curious, and remember, the other side is always watching.